August 15, 1943. The jungle perimeter of Kolombangara, Solomon Islands. The heat isn't just a temperature here. It is a physical weight, pressing down on the back of your neck like a wet wool blanket. The air is so thick with humidity and the sweet, sickly scent of rotting vegetation that every breath feels like you are drowning in slow motion. Private First Class Kenjiro Sato swathes a cloud of mosquitoes away from his face, but the effort leaves him dizzy. He leans against the trunk of a banyan tree, the rough bark digging into his shoulder blade, and looks down at his hands. They are shaking. Not from fear. Kenjiro has long since passed the point of fearing the American Marines, but from a caloric deficit that has been gnawing at his insides for 3 weeks. In his lap sits a tin of rice. It is his ration for the day. The grains are gray, clumped together, and speckled with weevils. To his left, his squad leader, Sergeant Tanaka, is polishing a Nambu pistol with a rag that looks cleaner than his own uniform. Tanaka's cheekbones are sharp ridges beneath papery skin. "Eat Sato," Tanaka rasps, not looking up. Kenjiro stares at the rice. "It smells like the damp, Sergeant." "It smells like life. Eat." Somewhere in the distance, the low, thrumming drone of aircraft engines vibrates through the canopy. American planes, always American planes. They circle like hawks, unending, fueled by a supply line that seems to span the entire ocean. Kenjiro forces a spoonful of the gray mush into his mouth. It tastes of mold and metal. He swallows, his stomach cramping in immediate protest. They are the Imperial Japanese Army. They are warriors of the Emperor, and they are starving to death on an island that God forgot, waiting for supply ships that the American submarines sank weeks ago. 2 weeks later, the Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. 5,000 miles away, the air is cool. It is filtered through electric fans that hum rhythmically in the corners of a polished oak. Conference room, there is no smell of rot here. There is the scent of floor wax, stale tobacco smoke, and freshly brewed coffee. James Forrestal, the Undersecretary of the Navy, stands by a window overlooking the Potomac. He is immaculately dressed, his suit pressed, his tie a sharp knot of silk. He isn't worrying about weevils in the rice. He isn't worrying about malaria. He is worrying about something that to Kenjiro Sato would sound like the hallucinations of a dying man. He is worrying about boredom. "The reports from the South Pacific are concerning, gentlemen," Forrestal says, turning to face the table of admirals and supply officers. He taps a manila folder on the table. "Not tactical concerns, morale concerns." An admiral clears his throat, shifting in his leather chair. "The men are fighting hard, sir. The heat is difficult." "It's not just the heat," Forrestal counters, his voice sharp. "It's the dry ships, General Order 99. We took the whiskey away from the sailors in 1914, and we never gave it back. You put a boy from Kansas on a tin can destroyer in the middle of the tropics. You take away his beer, you give him warm water to drink, and you expect him to keep fighting with a smile. No." Forrestal leans forward, placing both hands on the table. The weight of American industry is at his fingertips. Napoleon said an army marches on its stomach. Well, the United States Navy floats on its morale, and I've found the substitute for alcohol. He pauses for effect. The room is silent. "Ice cream," Forrestal says. A few glances are exchanged around the table. A supply officer adjusts his glasses. "Sir, we already supply ice cream mix to the larger vessels. The battleships and carriers have freezers." "I'm not talking about the battleships," Forrestal snaps. "I'm talking about the destroyers, the PT boats, the infantry sweating in the foxholes on those godforsaken rocks. They don't have freezers, they don't have galleys, they have warm sea rations and dysentery." "Sir," the supply officer ventures cautiously, "shipping refrigeration units to the front lines. The energy cost, the freon, it's a logistical nightmare. We need that shipping space for munitions, for fuel." Forrestal walks to the head of the table. He looks at the map on the wall, filled with pins marking the slow, grinding progress of the war. He knows something the Japanese High Command does not. He knows that the United States is not choosing between guns and butter. The United States is preparing to produce so much of both that the concept of scarcity will become obsolete. I want ice cream to be available to every sailor in the Pacific, Forrestal declares. I don't care if we have to build a floating factory to do it. If the men can't come to the soda fountain, we will float the soda fountain to the men. A floating factory, sir? The Admiral raises an eyebrow. A ship dedicated to dessert. Not a ship, Forrestal corrects himself. Looking at the resource allocation sheets, steel is precious. Steel builds hulls that stop torpedoes. He can't waste high-grade steel on a dairy parlor. He needs something else, something expendable, something abundant. A barge, Forrestal says. A concrete barge. The room goes quiet. Concrete ships are an old, desperate idea from the First World War. Heavy, slow, ugly beasts. To use one for this purpose seems insane. We will spend $1 million if we have to, Forrestal says, closing the folder. Build it. Fill it with freezers. I want it churning out vanilla and chocolate by the ton. We are going to bury the Axis powers, gentlemen, and we are going to do it with a smile on our faces and a cone in our hands. October 1943. Concrete Ship Constructors, National City, California. The dry dock creates a landscape of gray dust and grinding noise. This is not the sleek, lethal assembly line of the Boeing plants, nor the sparks and steel of the Newport News shipyards where aircraft carriers are born. This is a masonry project that learned how to float. Foreman Mike Kowalski wipes grit from his forehead and looks up at the hull of the quartz-glass barge looming above him. It looks less like a ship and more like a tombstone. It is 265 feet long, a monolithic slab of steel-reinforced concrete. Hey, Kowalski, a welder yells from the scaffolding. You hear what this tub is for? The specs just came down for the interior fitting. Kowalski spits into the dirt. Don't tell me more ammo storage, avgas. Nope, the welder grins, holding up a blueprint. Freezers, flash freezers, and storage for dry goods, milk powder, sugar. Kowalski stares at the man. You're joking. I ain't, and look at the machinery deck. They aren't putting in big diesel engines for propulsion. This thing doesn't even have an engine, Mike. It's got generators, massive ones, enough power to light up a small city. Kowalski looks back at the gray hull. He thinks about his brother, currently serving on a cruiser somewhere near the Philippines. He thinks about the rationing back home, the meatless Tuesdays, the gas stamps. And here he is, pouring concrete for a vessel designed to keep milk frozen at the equator. It feels ridiculous. It feels like a waste. But as he runs his hand over the rough, cold flank of the barge, Kowalski realizes something else. If the United States Navy can afford to build a concrete island just to make ice cream, then the war isn't just a fight. It's a flex. It is a display of power so absolute that it borders on arrogance. All right, Kowalski yells, clapping his gloved hands together. You heard the man. Get those forms set. The boys overseas are hungry. Back in the Solomons, Kenjiro Sato captures a lizard the size of his thumb. He will roast it over a smokeless fire. It will be his dinner. He does not know it yet, but he is already defeated. Not by a bomb, but by a barge that is currently drying in the California sun, waiting to be christened with a bottle of champagne and loaded with enough sugar to give an entire army a toothache. The USS Hydrogen and her sister barges are coming, and they are bringing the one thing the Japanese Empire cannot manufacture: excess. January 14, 1945. Ulithi Atoll, Caroline Islands. The lagoon at Ulithi is the greatest secret of the Pacific War. It is a parking lot for the apocalypse. Over 600 ships sit at anchor here, carriers, battleships, cruisers, stretching to the horizon like a steel city built on water. The air vibrates with the collective hum of boilers and the shouts of 50,000 men. But slowly, laboriously, a tugboat drags something new into the anchorage. It is not sleek. It has no guns. It is a gray, rectangular slab that sits low in the water, looking for all the world like a chunk of sidewalk that refused to sink. Lieutenant Commander Mac McAllister stands on the deck of the destroyer USS The Sullivans, squinting through his binoculars. He lowers them, wipes the lenses with his shirt tail, and looks again. What in God's name is that, skipper? A young ensign asks, pointing at the monolith. A floating dock. McAllister shakes his head. Too small for a dock, too ugly for a barracks. They watch as the tugboat heaves the concrete beast into position near the supply line. The vessel, if you can call it that, is the BRL, a barge, refrigerated large. It is the physical manifestation of the Pentagon's promise. Inside the BRL, 1 hour later, Chief Petty Officer Miller steps onto the deck of the concrete barge. The surface under his boots feels wrong. It doesn't give like steel. It has the dull, dead thud of a basement floor. The walls are thick, rough-cast concrete, painted a utilitarian gray. "Welcome aboard the Dairy Queen," a mechanic grins, wiping grease from his hands. He's wearing a t-shirt, not a uniform. "Watch your step, we're still vibrating." Miller descends the ladder into the belly of the barge. He expects the smell of diesel and sweat, the standard perfume of the Navy. Instead, he is hit by a wall of cold air so crisp it hurts his lungs. It smells sterile. It smells like a frantic chemistry experiment. The interior is a cavern of pipes and massive, whirring compressors. This is not a ship's hold. It is a factory floor. "Take a look at this," the mechanic says, patting the side of a massive chrome cylinder. "This right here, this is the churn." Miller stares at the machine. It's the size of a small car. "What's the output?" 10 gallons, the mechanic says proudly, every 7 minutes. Miller does the mental math and stops. That's 85 gallons an hour, 2,000 gallons a day. "If we run her hot, yeah, and we got the storage for it." The mechanic gestures to the massive freezer doors lining the bulkhead. "We can hold 500 tons of meat and produce in the forward hold, but the aft is strictly for the sweet stuff. Vanilla, chocolate, and if the supply ship comes in, strawberry." Miller walks over to the bulkhead and places his hand on the cold metal of a freezer door. He thinks about the price tag he saw on the manifest. $1 million. $1 million of taxpayer money, of war bonds purchased by grandmothers in Ohio, poured into a concrete tub designed to freeze sugar and milk in the middle of a tropical war zone. "It's insane," Miller whispers. "The Japs are fighting with bamboo spears and we're building this." "It ain't insane, Chief," the mechanic says, his voice losing its humor. "You ever see the look on a kid's face when he hasn't had a cold drink in 6 months, when he thinks he's gonna die in a foxhole without ever tasting home again? This here," he taps the concrete wall. "This is a weapon. It kills the fear." 5 miles away, the perimeter of the anchorage. The water breaks silently as a periscope shears through the surface. It is the eye of the I-400, a Japanese submarine monstrosity, an underwater aircraft carrier designed to strike terror into the American heartland. Captain Ariazumi grips the handles, sweating in the foul, recycled air of the sub. He scans the horizon of Ulithi. He sees the carriers. He sees the battleships. They are terrifying, yes. But his eyes lock onto the strange, gray shape being towed near the center of the fleet. "Identification," his executive officer asks, voice hushed. "Unknown," Ariazumi murmurs. "Box-like structure, no visible armament, no radar profile." He zooms in. He sees hoses being connected to a destroyer alongside it. He sees men cheering on the destroyer's deck. They are not loading shells. They are not loading fuel. They are carrying white cartons. "Is it a new weapon?" the XO asks. "A biological agent?" Ariazumi watches the Americans. They are laughing. One of them is holding something up, a cone, a white, melting cone. Ariazumi pulls back from the periscope, his face pale in the red emergency light. He knows the logistics of war. He knows that every pound of weight on a ship must be calculated for lethality. He knows his own men are eating rice mixed with sawdust to survive. And he has just witnessed the enemy dedicating an entire vessel, a massive concrete displacement of thousands of tons, solely to distribute snacks. "It is not a weapon," Ariazumi says, his voice hollow. "It is an insult." "Captain, they have so much," Ariazumi whispers, staring at the bulkhead of his starving submarine. "They have so much that they can afford to waste it. We are fighting a dragon that breathes gold." On the surface, the BRL's generators kick into high gear. The lights flicker, then stabilize. Deep in the concrete belly, the first batch of mix hits the freezing cylinder. The paddles begin to turn. The hum rises to a roar. The paradoxical machine is alive. The ice cream is coming. March 23, 1945. The logistical anchorage off Karamaretto, Ryukyu Islands. The ocean here is a parking lot of gray steel, rocking gently in the swell. But amidst the killers, the destroyers with their depth-charge racks and the cruisers with their bristling guns, there is a queue. It is the strangest queue in the history of naval warfare. 3 destroyers and a minesweeper are lined up alongside the concrete barge, their crews lining the rails like hungry schoolchildren. The air is thick with the smell of bunker fuel and salt, but cutting through it is something impossibly sweet. Vanilla. On the bridge of the destroyer USS Laffey, Captain Beckton leans over the railing, shouting through a megaphone at the barge's deck crew. "We picked up 2 of your flyers yesterday, Quartz. 2 of 'em. That's gotta be worth 5 gallons of strawberry." The supply officer on the concrete barge grins, shielding his eyes from the glare. "Standard rate is 10 gallons per pilot, Captain, but for the Laffey, we'll throw in a tub of chocolate sauce. Send over the line." A cheer goes up from the destroyer's crew that rivals. The sound of a kamikaze hit. A highline is shot across the gap between the ships. It doesn't carry ammunition. It doesn't carry medical supplies. It carries a canvas bag, sweating with condensation, heavy with 5-gallon tubs of frozen dairy. As the bag swings across the water, a transport ship slowly chugs past the formation. It is the USS Gen M. Patrick, and its deck is crowded not with Americans but with prisoners. On the deck of the transport ship, Major Yamashita, formerly of the Imperial Japanese Army's 32nd Army, sits huddled against a bulkhead. His uniform is tattered, his boots held together with wire. He has not eaten a full meal in 4 months. His men around him are skeletons wrapped in skin, their eyes hollow, staring at the massive American fleet with a mix of terror and confusion. Yamashita watches the scene unfolding 50 yards away. He sees the Americans on the destroyer. They are shirtless in the sun. They are laughing. They are passing cups to one another. "What is that?" Lieutenant Sata whispers, pointing a trembling finger at the concrete slab. "Is it fuel?" Yamashita squints. He sees a sailor on the barge open a spigot on a machine. A thick white substance flows into a bucket. It isn't oil. It isn't water. "Hey," an American guard yells, walking past them. He is eating something out of a paper cup with a wooden spoon. He stops, seeing the prisoners staring. He looks at his cup, then at the starving men. The cultural gap in that moment is wider than the Pacific Ocean. "Ice cream," the guard says, gesturing with the spoon. "Good stuff. You guys have ice cream in Tokyo." Yamashita understands English. He learned it at university in California, a lifetime ago. He stares at the guard. He stares at the concrete barge, a vessel that must displace 3,000 tons, built solely to manufacture a luxury that melts in the heat. He thinks of his own supply lines, ships sunk by submarines, men eating grass and lizards, the Emperor's command to endure the unendurable. He looks at the barge, churning out 10 gallons every 7 minutes, endlessly, effortlessly. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. The Americans did not just beat them with bombs. They beat them with excess. They beat them with a supply chain so overwhelming that they could afford to pave the ocean with concrete just to give their soldiers a treat on a Tuesday afternoon. "No," Yamashita whispers, tears mixing with the grime on his face. "We do not have ice cream." He lowers his head into his hands. The will to fight, the samurai spirit, the belief in divine destiny, it all shatters against the reality of a floating ice cream parlor. "We never had a chance," he murmurs. "They are fighting a war, we are fighting poverty." August 1945, the end of the line. The war ends not with an invasion of the home islands, but with a flash of light and a surrender. But the barges remain. They float in the harbors of occupied Japan, their generators still humming, their freezers still full. As the peace treaty is signed on the deck of the Missouri, the concrete barges continue their work. They serve the victors. They serve the liberated POWs who weep at the taste of cold sugar. And they serve as a silent, monolithic monument to the industrial might that crushed an empire. The Japanese commanders had prepared for fire. They had prepared for steel. But they were never prepared for a nation that could weaponize comfort, turning a childhood treat into a symbol of unstoppable, terrifying abundance.